Now we got to talk about Andrew Tate. And there's this guy, Mario Nafal, on Twitter, who seems to provide a lot of insights into what's going on with the latest on the Andrew Tate situation. Look, whether you're fighting for the Matrix or against the Matrix, I think it's very clear that everybody in the world deserves to know what is the Romanian government holding Andrew Tate for specifically. What kind of evidence is there? And this is leading to a lot of aggression on both sides. On one side, you have individuals saying, hey, there's plenty of evidence suggesting that, or that reiterate allegations of whether it's rape or money laundering, whatever it may be. And folks on the other side say, hey, that's just a social media persona. You can't arrest somebody off stuff they say on social media. It's kind of interesting because at the same time, there's this guy, Stephen McCullough, who apparently was live streaming while he ended up murdering a girl who was pregnant. But it ends up turning out that that live stream he was playing was just a recording of himself, and he left a bunch of hints like a total idiot in that live stream that he was, basically that this was no time to die. I should do a separate video on it, but it's crazy. Like, it's terrible to think that people post stupid stuff on the internet. And they're almost sort of like hints that, look, I'm brazen about the way I commit crimes. That's what some people are suggesting. Andrew Tate is kind of like that to some degree, that murderer guy who murders somebody but while pretending to be live streaming while it's just a recording, and at the same time is leaving hints about his criminal activity to sort of like in a macho and brazen way show that off. And so some people are connecting that to Andrew Tate, saying, hey, what he says online should be taken seriously because, he actually is doing these things and he's trying to get away with it, basically. So here's an interesting sort of important update they say here on the case against Andrew Tate. And Mario provides a quick recap here. He says, before getting into the developments, after an initial 30-day detention period in January, a Bucharest court extended the Tate's brothers' detention until February 27th. Keep in mind that you can only be detained for about 180 days in Romania, and then these have to be extended on 30-day periods. Generally, you can't be arrested without being charged for a crime. The thesis, though, is that, hey, we are going to charge you with a crime. We have not yet charged you with a crime, but we are going to do so. In the meantime, we're going to detain you because we feel if you are out of jail, you might manipulate or destroy evidence by either talking to people and threatening them and making them not cooperate with authorities, or destroying evidence or whatever. That's sort of the thesis, but it's leading a lot of people online to get very upset about this idea that, oh, no, Andrew Tate has been taken by the Matrix and he's innocent. Well, I think this is a situation where at some point, and the demands become louder and louder every day, everybody just needs to see what the evidence is, and then people can make up their mind. There are a lot of people, drawing conclusions right now on the internet. There's this one lady who keeps ranting about Andrew Tate, and one of the things that she says is, it's not fair that the government is listening to one person's testimony versus the other. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you know what the government is actually listening to? It makes for sort of like a viral clip for this podcast host arguing that the Romanian government is wrong for listening to one person's testimony over the other. We have no idea what they're looking at or what kind of evidence they have. So that's where one of the things that I look at is, I don't think, and I'm not sure, right? We'll find out. But if the Romanian government were to release Andrew Tate and there was no evidence or there were no charges, it would be a massive embarrassment to the Romanian government. Whereas if the Romanian government comes out with a substantial case against Andrew Tate and people look at the evidence and say, wow, this guy really is a bad person, then all of a sudden people will actually look at the Romanian government with respect, right? And I don't think the Romanian government wants to be embarrassed. So I don't think, just by considering that solely, I don't think it looks very good for Andrew Tate, especially since the judge explained his decision here, the capacity of the defendants to exercise permanent psychological control over their victims, including by resorting to constant acts of violence, is one of basically explanations for why they're being held. Their attorney, Tina Glandon, who's previously represented boxer Mike Tyson and singers Chris Brown and Kesha, has argued that the detention of the Tates for more than 30 days violates their international human rights. She's actually been on multiple interviews. She was just on with Piers Morgan as well, and she talks about how basically these detentions are violations of international human rights. And I mean, to some degree, without evidence, it is a little frustrating. In her talks, though, she suggests that, well, it's frustrating not for us publicly not to see what the evidence is. And she also apparently is not getting that evidence either. But one of the things she talks about is how this investigation has been going on since April. And she somewhat implies that they've been basically held against their will since April, when the reality is they were arrested December 29th. Don't get me wrong, that's still a long time to be arrested without evidence. But let's keep going here. She said a lack of evidence was shown by the fact that there's still no charges despite the brothers being in custody for a month and police investigating since April. Exactly. Glandon also said that Tristan Tate, which she implied that a little differently on her video. Glandon also said that Tristan Tate has been unable to meet his new 3-week-old child. She has also denied the brothers could flee Romania, even though the judge is suggesting maybe their passports, could be removed, or they could go under house arrest or whatever. This is basically her way of saying, hey, just let them out of jail. Just, keep them locked up at home or whatever. Despite the brothers facing no trial, some providers are already starting to red label them, in effect sanctioning them from using the banking system. So this is sort of like restricting their ability to transact at banks. For example, Comply.Advantage already displays a bunch of red flags on Andrew Tate's name under various categories. This is sort of when finance institutions operate with customers, they decide whether or not to restrict certain activities based on red flags that come up in international reports. In a video released in January, the brothers' lawyer, their old lawyer, complains that the Tate brothers are being prosecuted on the basis of extrajudicial evidence. This basically means reports that were not requested by the courts. In other words, there's this, and this has been what's circulating, is this idea that, some psychologist has made the conclusion that these individuals are unsafe to others. And that a judge shouldn't be holding them against their will solely because of the report of an individual or multiple other individuals. Again, this is where I think I don't believe the Romanian court wants to be embarrassed here, and I would hope that if they're actually holding folks against their will, clearly, and in violation of potential international human rights laws, that they actually have substantial evidence that maybe the world just doesn't know about. Because really what we have right now, or what people believe about the Tates, are just sort of random clips of him suggesting things that just don't sound very good. Now, a lot of people say these suggestions or these clips online that don't sound very good are really just him being Andrew Tate. That's his social media personality, right? And you can't charge him for crimes for things that he's talking about online, whether that's recordings like this. Let's take a listen here for a moment here.
You didn't like that I was thinking I can do whatever I want to. That's what it is. I'm the smartest person on this planet.
That's a voice.
We'll fast forward here a little bit. I just want to get to the clips here. Shout out to the Law and Crime Network for this. I'm kind of just skipping past your commentary and adding my own, but thank you for the audio here. Shout out to you guys. Go subscribe to the Law and Crime Network.
Because the more you didn't like it, the more I enjoyed it. I f***ing loved how much you hated it. Turned me on. Seriously so offended I strangled you a little bit. You didn't f***ing pass out. Chill the f*** out. Jesus Christ. I thought you were cool. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, so some of that kind of audio that sort of implies, basically it's cut up audio, but it pretty clearly says, hey, oh, you didn't like that, I R-A-P, these things don't sound very good. Now, is that evidence enough to hold somebody without charges? Probably not, because, there are two sides to every story, and of course we've seen plenty of people come out and actually defend the Tate brothers, saying, no, like, this is just play. This is all just, for the show. We do this for social media. Tate's a good person. He's done nothing wrong. That's the primary argument we generally get from defenders of Tate. Here's what the attorney argues with Piers Morgan. Let's listen in for a moment.
How long can that process continue before a charging decision is
fast forward,
100 detention order, there 180.
Bellowing his innocence as he's been led in and out of these court hearings and so on. Do you believe them? Do you believe that he and his brother are innocent?
At this point, Piers, they've had this investigation going since April. We're now February, and there are not even charges filed against them. So this is a huge injustice the way we see it. They should not be detained at this point.
Did you notice she dodged the question? Piers Morgan says, do you believe them? And she goes right into talking about how it's an injustice that they're arrested. Now, don't get me wrong. If I were if I were the Tate's attorneys, I would kind of probably be doing what she's doing. You do the media circuit, right? What you're trying to do is you're trying to build pressure on the Romanian government, right? So you play the media game, you know, you try to go to jail, you get kicked out because you can't visit your client. You go on Piers Morgan and all the shows going, this is an international injustice. It's basically a way for her to pressure the international community, to pressure the Romanian government to finally actually release some evidence and some charges or release the individuals, right? Now, one of the things that has been kind of interesting, and we'll play a little bit more of this in just a moment, but one of the things that has been kind of interesting is there's been talk that these individuals, the Tate brothers, well, we've known this. We've seen plenty of clips of the Tate brothers come out of sort of court or between court and jail, and they'll shout at the cameras. They'll talk to the cameras, and they'll say things, you know, to sort of bolster their case. Like, for example, this clip right here. Take a listen to this. This has been pretty typical. Watch this.
In America, if you're rich, they think you're an actor. In London, if you're rich, they think you're a businessman. In Romania, if you're rich, they think you're a criminal. Strange.
All right, so in America, if you're rich, you're an actor. In Britain, if you're rich, you're a businessman. And in Romania, if you're rich, you're a criminal. That's you know, he's made statements like this regularly, right? Regularly has he made statements suggesting that, hey, you know, there's no evidence. But what's interesting is one of the more recent videos of his transportation has actually been completely silent. Look at this. We'll just play this here and turn the audio up on this too. So you can actually, when they come out, you'll see they're completely silent. Now, I also want to know how they have like so many different compartments in this van. Like, this van is like really impressive. Like, I kind of want one of these.
You are okay, Tate? A, uitați, țanțoși mândri. Vedeți? Now
that's pretty unusual, right? It's pretty unusual because usually they say something. Now some folks are saying that maybe the judge in the case is very upset that they've now been classified as dangerous prisoners because they try to talk to the media when they travel. The Tate brothers handed a particular note, for example, to one of the reporters and shouted like, "Here, take this," and that's led to the judge being a little bit upset over essentially their communication with the media, which you're not supposed to do, but it's possible. Maybe that's why they were silent during that moment. We could keep looking through some of these items here. Here you've got, per the court documents, women were convinced to come from abroad and were misled about the intention of Tate to establish a relationship with those women and either marry them or live with them. At the time when this one particular victim, according to a court document, arrived in Romania, the defendant was not in the country, and she was told, the injured person, that she would not be able to live in the apartment. Okay, a little confusingly written here. Instead, the person would have to live with the person who bought the plane ticket, picked her up from the airport, and drove her to the building where she was going to live. Blah blah blah. I mean, you get a lot of sort of these anecdotes from both sides. I think ultimately the goal here of, if there is a preventative arrest, there should be at some point here, hopefully soon, a very clear list of charges that the Tate brothers could actually defend, right? Now, again, they've hired a new attorney over here, and she's argued, the one that you just saw on the Piers Morgan show, that she's been refused entry to the jail where the Tate brothers are being held. Again, this is part of sort of the media circuit of, like, you got to put pressure on the government. So what do? You get kicked out of jail. Then you've got some, seizures that happened over the last few days, such as 14 watches being seized, $294,000 of Bitcoin being seized, Bucharest Court of Appeals. Now, it's interesting. This is actually important to know, is it's not just one judge who's holding Andrew Tate against his will. It's now a Court of Appeals rejecting their appeal on the opportunity for the Romanian government to hold them for an additional 30 days. We'll come back to this here in a moment. And there's a BBC journalist, this guy, Paul Kenyon, and he's planning on releasing a detailed documentary or interview or something tomorrow on February 8th. He talks about how he visited the Tate's house in Bucharest. Aside from this metal sentinel by the front door, he says it's pretty underwhelming. An old converted factory near a cemetery surrounded by wasteland doesn't feel like the home of a multimillionaire, he says. Now, obviously, this is going to get a lot of backlash, this particular individual here, because, hey, like, who are you to sort of pass a judgment, right? But then again, he's just making sort of the observation. Hey, here's what the home looks like in Bucharest. Apparently, it says here, a Norman Bates-inspired meat factory. And this BBC author argues that Andrew Tate has a fictitious chain of casinos. His webcam empire is just two girls in an apartment, basically, and his home is basically like a meat factory. The person sounds a little biased. Note, the only reason I hit the like on this was so I could quickly go back to it for the purpose of reviewing this, because I just look at the like history, see tweets by Meat Kevin. Just follow me on Twitter at RealMeatKevin. You can see all these things yourself. I put them there as sort of just documentation of what we're seeing. So, and this BBC author or a journalist argues that the irony for Andrew Tate is, in order to prove his claims about being fabulously rich, he will need to show us his money. But if he does, then the Romanian prosecutors are going to seize it, which they have. They've been seizing almost all of his assets. So right here, this is where Paul Kenyon says, this is what I couldn't tell you until today. We have the first British complainant against Andrew Tate, a former girlfriend who alleges violence and coercion. She is helping Romanian prosecutors with inquiries. And so apparently this is the kind of individual who is potentially contributing to why Andrew Tate is staying arrested. Again, that's led to a lot of anger, like this person here, pretty dang angry. We'll go ahead and play her clip here. And this is where I'd mentioned that one of the reasons, well, I mean, you'll listen to it yourself here. So let's listen to why is she angry? Let's listen to it.
This is some sickness that you have two women coming out and saying, and I've heard many, I've probably heard 5 or 6 or 7 now, even interviews, conversations with Jasmina. She is coherent. She is intelligent. She says her piece. She has said repeatedly, I'm not a victim. They even asked her in one interview, they said, if evidence came out that you couldn't refuse, it was there, it was actual evidence, would you accept it? She said, yes. That's just not what happened. I was living there. That is not my experience, my story. How dare a society accept one woman's statement as fact and ignore another woman's statement because you don't like one message and you want the other message on a pedestal. That is not how a legal system should operate. That is corrupt.
Yeah, so I mean that's obviously a statement there that's designed to evoke emotion, right? Because if what she is saying is true, then of course that's not how a legal system is supposed to operate. But we don't know if what she is saying is true. We don't know if that's why the Romanian court is extending the detention of Andrew Tate, right? So at this point, it seems like there are a lot of people on social media who will say anything in the world to defend Andrew Tate because the army of Tate supporters love that. I tried my best to take a neutral stance. That means I'm probably going to, some people aren't going to like that. But I'm just curious, like for me, I just want to see the evidence. Just show me the evidence. Then I can make my opinion. Obviously here, we're not expecting the attorney to opine about whether or not her clients are actually in trouble or have committed any kind of wrong. Obviously, we're not expecting that. So I want to be clear when I said she avoided that question. It's just, it was an interesting question by Piers Morgan is maybe the way to look at it. But obviously, that's something that an attorney probably should dodge. But then again, a lot of attorneys will come out and say, I absolutely believe my clients are innocent, right? And she didn't take that opportunity. But anyway, let's listen to just a little bit more here, and then we'll keep going.
I think it's now crossed over to the point where it's violating international human rights law, because the deprivation of your liberty pre-trial is the most severe form of punishment a state can impose. And that's what they've done in this case. And they've had a very lengthy investigation with the government's resources. They've been analyzing and looking at all of their devices since April when they seized everything. And here we are, February, and charges aren't filed. So I think there's absolutely no evidence that's been presented. And that's our position.
Yeah, and again, this kind of goes on and it goes in circles about this idea of, hey, there's no evidence that's been filed yet. Obviously, and again, I want to just be very, very clear about this. Obviously, if tomorrow the Tate brothers get released and the remaining court's like, yep, nope, never mind, we don't have anything, that'd be terrible. That would be so wrong. It would prove essentially his innocence and the family's innocent. It would hopefully restore humanity's faith in essentially the social media influencers, because they've got a pretty dare I say volatile reputation in that you've got some folks believing every single word that they say and absolutely loving them, and on the other side you've got people hating absolutely everything. And generally when you have that kind of divisiveness, you kind of have almost like a Trumpian style environment where people will do anything for the person and people will do everything against the person. And that's always a tough position to be in, because ultimately I think a more balanced view and more nuanced view is necessary. But that's very difficult to convey on the internet, the balanced support or criticism of someone. But anyway, if this detention continues, as it's rumored that it will, that this trial may not actually complete until, or really get going until May, Tate brothers could be gone for quite a while. That's another 3 months away, and then you get into trial, and then we're going to be covering the evidence on that. The evidence is going to be quite interesting, so I'm very curious to see what that looks like, and we'll definitely be covering it. But at least at this point, all we know is we've got a court that's holding someone, no evidence yet, and we got a lot of people that are very pissed off, and a whole lot of other people who are like, finally, some justice for women. We'll see.